is oh so still.
Greetings, everyone. Brad here with Mild Mannered EDC, and today we're going to look at what I think is actually a very mild mannered knife. That is the Quiet Carry IQ. That's right, the IQ from Quiet Carry. Very interesting knife. I know it's been reviewed a number of times by a lot of other channels, but I wanted to give my take on it. Also, give you a sense of why I picked it up, because I think that's part of the story for why this knife is in my collection, why I'm reviewing it, and what I think about it. So I thought I'd share that story a little bit, and then we'll just get into a classic mild-mannered review. So this particular Quiet Carry, not too long after starting the channel, I ended up actually selling my Monterey Bay Knives EZC. And the EZC was a very cool knife, and it is a very cool knife. And they have a 2.0 version now, although I think they're sold out. But I really liked it. It was one of Monterey Bay Knives' kind of first offerings. I think it came out after the Min Pin, if I'm remembering correctly, but could be wrong. Anyways, really, really nice knife. I mean, classic sort of Ray Laconico looks, right? Very discreet, but also very clean. Easy to carry, great size, great little blade, good action, etc. Just a nice knife. Certainly a knife that sort of speaks to me. And after I sold it, I kind of noticed that I was missing. I was kind of missing it, right? That sort of silvery, smaller sized frame lock that I could carry kind of discreetly. I do a lot of work wearing a suit or in and around government buildings and things like that. So I like a nice little discreet carry, depending on what I'm up to on any given day. So I was kind of looking around, and so I kind of amplified my interest again in the Quiet Carry. And so I ended up just picking one up because I was interested. And they were sold out for a hot minute. And so as soon as the new batch sort of came in, I picked this one up. So there you go. That's a little bit of the preamble and the backstory. So I guess the question is, and we'll talk about it through the review, is did this sort of fill that niche that niche in my collection that I was trying to fill by getting rid of or after I parted with, because I didn't really get rid of it. I just sort of parted with it, the Monterey Bay Knives EZC. So did this fill that hole in my heart, if you will? So let's talk about it. So it's a really interesting knife. This one's slightly different. You'll notice there's a 3D milling there on the scales, and we'll talk about that. I'm not sure if that was actually offered as an option before, or if that's a relatively new option. But I went ahead and picked it up because I thought it looked unique to me. So there you go. So let's do a couple of size comparisons real quick, and then we'll... Shoot, Brad, you're getting ahead of yourself, aren't you?
Slow down, boy. Slow down. Take your time.
Let's talk some specs first, and then we'll do a quick size comparison. So specs, spoiler alert, there'll be a Campara size comparison there. Specs, 2.9-inch blade, very thin, very slicey, 0.9-inch blade stock. You've got a handle length of 3.7 inches, and an overall, when it's all opened up here, of 6.6 inches, and a very light, airy 2.2 ounces. So, a lot of good spec, a lot of the specs there I dig for sure. So let's get into that size comparison that I was promising and so anxious and kind of got ahead of myself. So, Spyderco Campara, Benchmade bug out. And again, I've been told that my size comparisons are not very helpful because I do them at an angle, but I don't know. Let me know down in the comments if you want me to start doing those a little differently. How about a Ontario Rat number 1? You can see much, much bigger than the Rat number 1. And up here on the ledge, I've got a Spyderco Delica. So there you go. That's kind of what we got here for size comparisons. Hopefully, even despite the angle, that's somewhat useful. So it's definitely on the smaller side and very, very compact as knives go. So let's go ahead and get underway with our classic mild-mannered review. And when we do a classic mild-mannered review, we will talk about the blade, we will talk about the action, we will talk about the scales and hardware of this knife, and then we'll finish up on ergos and carry. So the blade. Like I mentioned, 2.9 inches of very thin, slicey L-Max steel. There it is. I think this is only the second knife in my collection to have L-Max. Yeah, I think so. That's true. So there you go. L-Max steel. You've got sort of what they're calling a modified sheep's foot. Okay. Reverse Tonto. I don't know what the whatever I don't really know the difference of some of those, but they're calling it modified sheep's foot. So there you go. It is a flat grind, kind of starting up here and moving on down. Stone washed finish. Although maybe they call this satin. I don't know. Maybe that's satiny. I don't know. I think it kind of looks stone washy, but what do I? You got a nice little swedge here, kind of up at the top, and as I mentioned, very, very thin stock, and this comes down to a super slicey edge. I mean, look at the width kind of behind the edge there. I hope you can see that. Yeah, very, very thin, great blade. Just, I mean, it's interesting because it's 2.9 inches, which is almost to that 3, right? So, if you have under 3-inch laws in your state, this one definitely will work for you. But it's also enough blade that you're actually able to do things with it. It's not so small that it's like, I'm kind of sort of under carrying, if you know what I mean. Which sometimes happens with small knives when you're trying to do things. But for its size, I think you get a very, very nice little blade here. So you got a little choil, and again, the grind is pretty darn good. It wasn't the sharpest knife ever that came out of the box. It was plenty sharp. It's not like it didn't cut things. It did very, very well, and still does. But it wasn't made necessarily the keenest grind ever, if that makes sense. But yeah, and then very subtle branding, quiet carry. L-Max, that's about it that's on the blade. I think that's very attractive, very, very well done. So, just overall, a good looking blade, kind of unique looking and very functional. So that's what we've got there with blade. Now let's talk about action. As you can see, this is a flipper deployed knife, and it is a titanium frame lock. Yeah, there you go. It's got a very, very nice action. And in fact, yeah, this is it's good. It's just very good. So it's running on cage ceramic ball bearings. This has just got a really, really nice action for its size. Oftentimes when you have these smaller knives or thinner blades, it's hard to get them to be, sort of drop shutty just because of there's just not that much weight behind the blade. But on this one, yeah, the action, yeah, and it's actually the detent is also detent. I've got all kinds of variations of words today, don't I? The detent on this is it's really dialed in nicely. In fact, so no wrist, nothing, just yeah, and that's with minimal pressure. You put any kind of pressure on it, it flies open. Really, really nice action. And as I've had it and owned it for a bit longer, it's gotten even better and smoother. So I really, really like the action on this knife.
It's nice.
It's hard to argue with, and I actually think from a fidget factor, I think I kind of enjoy this one a bit more than I did the EZC. I never was a huge fan of the flipper tab on the EZC, and I do like this flipper tab better. And it is, pretty modest. Yeah, it's just so really, really nice little action. No blade play, no blade rock at all, which I like to see, love to see. If you can see in there, pretty substantial lockup. I mean, we're about 75, 80% there. That doesn't bother me at all because you've got a over travel stop there as well as a lock bar insert. So yeah, no lock stick, nothing of that nature. And just from an action standpoint, I think the cutouts here are done pretty darn well where I don't have any issue or have any discomfort using those. So there you go. That's what we've got for action on this quiet carry. Nice action. Really, really good action, actually. So let's talk scales and hardware. So scales and hardware. As I mentioned, see if I can get this to kind of show up. You can see it's sort of got a 3D milling effect going on. You've got the very telltale 4 dots that you get from quiet carry, which I think is a really neat, really subtle sort of aesthetic maker's mark that's consistent on all the knives that he does. And from my understanding, he is just one guy. He outsources these to an OEM that nobody really knows, but whatever, they're doing pretty darn good work here. So that's what you have. You have a sort of 3D micro milled titanium, which I think looks really nice. It gives a little bit of texture. I mean, just the slightest bit of texture. It's almost smooth, but there is just a little bit of texture there, which I actually like, considering that this could have been a very slippery knife. I think it's nice to have this, just a tad, just the slightest little extra bit of grip to keep it in your hands. Now, there is sort of a weird effect because I think he stone washes it as well, and it creates sort of a weird, it almost looks a little worn a bit, the effect. I don't know if that's showing up on camera at all, and I apologize for the glare there. But yeah, so it's a little bit funky, but That's all right. You've got a titanium backspacer here, a titanium clip, stainless steel hardware, screws, and pivot. And you've noticed you basically those two. And then on this side, same thing. A couple of little weird things I've noticed. So the lock bar insert, it's screwed from the inside out. Okay, fine, no problem there. But it's just sort of weird how that it's like you had to then chop off the screw or use really tiny screws. And you can kind of see the slight threading there. I don't know. It just looks a little bit weird, a little bit tiny, and kind of almost sort of slightly unfinished, if that makes sense. But I'm not complaining about it. There's no snag there or anything. It's nice. The clip, as you can see, you have to sort of insert your screwdriver through the hole there, and you can go that direction. There is no lanyard hole on this particular knife. So there you go. That's kind of what you've got here with scales and hardware. Now, let's talk about ergos and carry. So the ergos are pretty darn good. I mean, it's a stick, right? I mean, it's a square stick, or rectangle rather. So there's not a whole lot to argue with there. I don't get a hot spot from the clip, maybe just the slightest bit here. But again, we've talked about how hot spots and things like that can be very subjective, especially if they're from sort of subtle things like clips, etc. And I also don't notice any sort of bite in my finger down here. I was worried about that because you can kind of see how, especially on the lock bar, when they carved in this little access so you can push the blade over, almost guillotined my thumb right there. I thought, boy, I might get a little bit of a uncomfortable spot there when I'm holding it, but I don't. I just don't. So it feels really good. And this knife feels really well balanced. So when it's in my hand, I don't feel the need to have to choke up. I actually think I can choke up without too much worry. As I mentioned, there's a little bit of a choil there, and you can kind of sneak in there if you're careful. I don't really feel like I have to, just with the way this knife sits in my hand. I'm perfectly comfortable just kind of holding it. And it fits my hand really well to sort of do detail work, etc. So I think the ergos on this are pretty darn good, considering, like I said, it's basically a rectangle. Now, carry. So it is not ambidextrous in terms of carry. The clip is just on the one side. So there you go. Like that or hate it. That's the nature of the beast. It's super compact, super thin. Let me show you, kind of compared to the bug out here. Yeah, I mean, it's about as thin, or maybe, yeah, it's about almost identical to the bug out in terms of, oops, I see I'm looking at it, but I'm not showing you. There you go. Sorry about that. Almost, it's about as thin as the bug out. So very, very thin, very compact. The blade, just disappears in the knife, right? I mean, it's just, you can't, it's right there. But the fit and finish is great in terms of there is, I can't touch the blade, which is great, even considering how thin this is. It's not exposed in the back. Obviously not exposed here on the tip either. By the way, very centered. Maybe, is it? Yeah, it's centered. Centered pretty darn well. I didn't mention that in action, but that's what it is. It's centered. So from a carry standpoint, really, really good. Pocket clip, it's a little tight, but it's not the worst that I've had. And in fact, I think I'm actually going to send this off to, I'm going to reach out to my buddy Nick over Stasa23, great channel over there, but he does some pretty awesome anno work. And so I thought he could do a polished sort of dragon effect anno for me on that to give this knife just a little pop. What do you think about that? I don't know. Let me know down in the comments if that sounds like a good idea, or if something you think would make this knife look good, because I think it would. So anyways, so that's where we're at, So what do we got here? You got a $200 knife, made in China, kind of a interesting design, very subtle, very classic, very classy. I think all those things are words that come to mind. For about roughly, I paid a little bit less for the EZC. I think I paid like actually, I think I paid about the same for my EZC. So maybe this is about $10 more. The new EZCs, I think, are integrals, so they're a bit more expensive. But overall, yeah, I think this does, it's filled that spot that the EZC used to fill for me. So I feel very happy with this, and I like this. And in some ways, I like it more than the EZC. It's just a little bit different. It's a little thinner, a little lighter. And for me, I like the blade, and I like that it's an LMAX. So that kind of all those things kind of suit me. The ergos work for me, etc. I think this is a darn good little knife. I think for the money, it's not perfect. There are a couple little things, a little bit of an unfinished spot here that has a bit of a snag. I think you can see that actually if I put that up. So, I mean, it's not, whatever. No knife is really perfection, but I think for the money, this is a pretty decent option. Would I like to see it a little cheaper? Sure, but it's basically, it's not a big operation over there churning these things out. So, so that's sort of where I'm at with the Quiet Carry IQ, at least the variant that I have. I like it a lot. I do think it's going to be staying in my collection, certainly if I end up getting the pocket clipped anode. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed this review. I hope if you're interested in the Quiet Carry, you might this might give you thought to go pick one up if that's something you've been looking at for a while now. So with that, stay safe out there. Be mild-mannered to one another, and all the best.
You ring that bell, big bell, shout